Order, please. We'll now proceed with the daily routine, beginning with presenting and reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I beg leave to table a report entitled Real Nova Scotians Annual Report 2012.
Order.
Oh.
Presenting reports of committees. The Honourable Member for Sackville-Beaverbank. You have a report?
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of Private and Local Bills, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bill. Bill number 11, Sir William Young's Benevolent and Charitable Fund Act. The committee recommends this bill to the favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Bills. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And today there seems to be a lot of help and cooperation in the House, which I really regard. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a report entitled Real Nova Scotians Annual Report 2012-2013 from the Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation.
The report is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my capacity as the Attorney General and pursuant to Section 51 of the Judicature Act, I hereby beg leave to table civil procedure rules. These revisions were made in accordance with the Judicature Act by the judges of the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia on June 28, 2013.
The report is tabled. We'll move on to statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Gordon Wynot of Petite Riviere was recognized for being a member of the Petite Riviere Fire Department for 56 years, and whereas Gordon is the last remaining founding member of the Petite Riviere Volunteer Fire Department, and whereas Gordon received his 50-year medal at the annual banquet held November 30th, 2013. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly congratulate Gordon Wynot on his 50-year medal and thank him for his many years of service to the Petite Riviere Volunteer Fire Department. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy and Communications, Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas research shows that switching to LED lights creates energy savings of more than 50% and helps lower greenhouse gas and mercury emissions, and whereas LED roadway lighting designs and manufactures high-efficiency street lights that are maintenance-free for 20 years and is exporting its technology to municipal, utility, and commercial industrial users around the globe, and whereas LED roadway lighting's NXT Lumiere series was recently selected to appear in the internationally recognized 2013 Illuminating Engineering Society Progress Report for its contribution to advancing art and science of lighting. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the legislature recognize LED roadway lighting for this significant achievement. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness and Seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I could make an introduction before my resolution.
Please do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, joining us in the East Gallery today are some of the board members of the Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation, and with us today are Dr. Jean Gray, who is the chair of the board, and I would ask them to stand as I call your name. Maureen Summers, also a board member, and from the NSHRF staff, we have Krista Connell, CEO of the foundation, Sarah Berkmans, a communications officer with the foundation, and Tabitha Arsenal, the financial administration for the foundation. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome our guests and ask that they receive the warm welcome of the House. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation was founded in 2000 to improve the health of Nova Scotians through health research. And whereas the Foundation's goal is to assist, collaborate with, and fund individuals and organizations conducting health research in the province, and whereas the Foundation's work provides the basis for informed decision-making with research and champions health researchers provincially, nationally and internationally. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation on its relentless work to support health research in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of motion and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy and Communications, Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia sends a large Christmas tree to Boston each year as a thank you gift for their help and friendship following the Halifax explosion in 1917. And whereas on Thursday, December 5th in Boston Common, this year's tree from Mill Cove, Nova Scotia was lit during a special ceremony in front of approximately 30,000 people. And whereas each year the tree is accompanied by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and this year included Constable Blair Dole, and perhaps inspired by the spirit, the following evening, Constable Dole proposed to his now fiancée Patricia in front of the tree for Boston. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly send congratulations to Constable Dole and Patricia Martins and wish them a lifetime of happiness and many more great memories like this one. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia is home to highly skilled, talented, and in-demand workers, and whereas the positive response from employers at the recent Get Connected career fair in Bedford and the more than 700 available jobs demonstrated the high demand for the skills and talents of our information and communications technology and customer care workers. And whereas the career fair provided BlackBerry, Convergys, and Xerox workers with the contacts, job leads, and information they need to take full advantage of these opportunities. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House agree that working with industry, employers, and service providers, we can help to bring business and talent together to help Nova Scotians turn losses into new opportunities and help our business grow. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future date that I shall move.
Oh, order, please. Sorry, Bill. Okay. We'll move on to introduction of bills. The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce an act to provide dental health care for all Nova Scotian children.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide Dental Health Care for All Nova Scotian Children.
Bill number 25, entitled An Act to Provide Dental Health Care for All Nova Scotian Children.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Affordable Hearing Aids for Seniors.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Affordable Hearing Aids for Seniors.
Bill number 26, entitled An Act to Provide for Affordable Hearing Aids for Seniors.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. We'll move on to notices of motion. I recognize the Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. À une date ultérieure, je demanderai l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que David Bourque de Saint-Anne-du-Ruisseau a lancé son premier livre, Joséphine et le tyran, le 8 juin 2013 au campus de Tuskegee de l'Université Sainte-Anne, et attendu que Joséphine et le tyran est une histoire de deux sauterelles qui ont été victimes de l'intimidation et du harcèlement, qui raconte comment on réussit à faire face aux problèmes. Et attendu que David Bourque, un enseignant à la retraite, a écrit cette histoire avec l'espoir de faire appel aux enfants âgés de 10 ans ou plus et de promouvoir un débat ouvert avec les parents, les amis et les enseignants au sujet de ce problème grave. Par conséquent, qu'il soit résolu que les membres de cette Assemblée se joignent à moi pour féliciter M. David Bourque pour le lancement de son livre, le remercier pour l'amener son histoire à autres et pour lui souhaiter beaucoup de succès dans ses projets au futur. Monsieur le Président, je demande l'adoption de cette résolution sans préavis et sans débat. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas David Bourque of Saint-Anne-du-Ruisseau launched his first book entitled Joséphine and the Tyran on June 8, 2013, at the Tuskegee campus of University of Sainte-Anne. And whereas Joséphine and the Tyran is a story about two grasshoppers who became victims of intimidation and harassment and how they dealt with it. And whereas David Bourque, a retired school teacher, wrote the story in the hope that it would appeal to children 10 years or more and promote open discussion with parents, friends, teachers, and on the growing social phenomenon of bullying. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate David Bourque on the release of his book, thank him for bringing his story to others, and wish him continued success in writing. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in June of this year, the four Atlantic premiers initiated a pan-Atlantic consultation and research initiative aimed at determining the impact of recent changes made by the federal government to the employment insurance program. And whereas last week we learned that the new Liberal Premier ordered CUPE's Danny Kavanagh removed from that position without good reason, and whereas the Labour movement has dedicated substantial resources to both studying and publishing information on the possible effects the changes to EI will have on working Canadians, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature agrees that removing CUPE's Danny Kavanagh from the panel sends a bad message to the nearly 1/3 of Nova Scotia's workforce who are represented by organized labour. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Kevindale Valley of Yarmouth is a major contestant in the CBC search for Canada's next great hockey song. Thank you. And whereas Kevin is well known in the Yarmouth community for his avid support of the Mariners hockey team and for his contribution to the arts, and whereas Kevin last year entered a CBC songwriting competition and finished in the top 20 and has been writing songs and poetry for a number of years, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Kevin Valley on his achievement in the CBC search for the next great hockey song and wish him well in his future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Monica Graham of Sunreach, Pictou County launched her latest novel entitled Fire Spook in the fall of 2013, and whereas Miss Graham's latest novel is a 120-page account of paranormal activity that occurred in Caledonia, Pictou County in 1922, and whereas Miss Graham is a writer, journalist, blogger, and photographer who freely shares her talent with the residents of Pictou County, as well as volunteering with many organizations. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Ms. Graham on the launch of her latest novel and wish her much success with her future writing projects. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable House Leader for the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I read this on behalf of the member from Sackville-Cobequid. I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ben Ross-Sang of Lower Sackville is a graduate of Sackville High, whereas Ben was a member of the Sackville High School football team in 2008, was awarded the High School League MVP, High School League Rookie of the Year in 2009 First Team All-Star, and whereas after attending Western University, Ben returned home to Nova Scotia in September 2013 to play quarterback for the St. Mary's Huskies football team. Therefore, be resolved, Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Lower Sackville Ben Ross-Sang on his accomplishments in football and extends best wishes for future success as he continues his studies and plays as quarterback for the St. Mary's Huskies football team. Speaker, I ask for waiver of debate and passage without, or waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas MAD Canada has been the voice of victims of impaired driving for almost 25 years in Canada. Whereas Project Red Ribbon has been a vital part of that program, reaching out to the public, asking them to drive safe and sober, not only during the Christmas season, but throughout the year. And whereas the Red Ribbon sends a message asking motorists to make a commitment to safe and sober driving and ask them to pay tribute to the 4 people killed and 175 injured every day on our Canadian roadways. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly recognize and thank the MAD Canada chapters of Nova Scotia for their dedication and hard work as they continue their battle to stop impaired driving. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Sydney River, Myra, Lewisburg.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas J.R. Mahoney Limited in Sydney Rivers recently celebrated a great milestone, and whereas J.R. Mahoney Limited celebrated their 50th anniversary on November the 23rd, 2013, and whereas everyone at J.R. Mahoney Limited takes great pride in their business as they have been serving the food and service industry since 1963. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Robert Mahoney, owner of J.R. Mahoney Limited, on this celebration and thank him and his staff for all their dedication to their customers. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Sydney Whitney Pier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas from November 20th to 24th, the 24th annual ESSO Major Bantam Hockey Tournament was held in Halifax. And whereas 20 teams from across Atlantic Canada participated in the tournament, and whereas for the first time in the tournament's history, the Breton Sport and Trophy Cougars captured championship honors. Therefore, be it resolved that Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Breton Sport and Trophy Cougars on their outstanding athletic achievement and wish them continued success in their future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dr. Ryan Legier is proud to call Timberley home. Growing up, Ryan went through the local school system and graduated from Dal University, where he obtained his doctorate in dental surgery in 2009. And whereas on Saturday, the 23rd of November, Dr. Legier proudly opened the first family dental office in Timberley, where he and his staff will provide a wide range of dental services and treatments to area residents. And whereas Dr. Legier is a loyal sports fan with hockey and college football close to his heart, he continues to be heavily involved in the local junior hockey scene on various levels and takes pride in giving back to the sport that played a large role in his life. Therefore, be it resolved that this Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate Dr. Ryan Legier and his staff on the opening of the Timberley Dental Centre and wish him great success in the future, both in his business endeavours and as an active community volunteer. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas La Cooperative Artisanale has been a community centre and a promoter of local art and artists for over 50 years, and whereas La Cooperative Artisanale recently won the Cooperators National Co-op Challenge Grand Prize to reward success and help the co-op, and whereas the organization had been granted $25,000, access to business consultation and a media shoot. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Legislature acknowledge the role La Cooperative Artisanale has played in the community of Cheticamp and wish them continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Queens Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas after the terrible tragedy that hit the Bangladesh clothing factory in April of 2013, Queens County author Sue Borenson wrote a piece she called Knickers, documenting her thoughts on the conditions in Bangladesh today compared with Stanfield's here in Nova Scotia 100 years ago. And whereas Sue Borenson's writing has been selected by an international publisher for inclusion in the book Foreign and Far Away, an anthology which explores the relationship between people and the landscapes and the settings they live in. And whereas all proceeds from the sale of the book Foreign and Far Away will benefit Book Aid International, which increases access to books that supports education and development in sub-Saharan Africa. Therefore, it be resolved that the House of Assembly congratulates Sue on her selection of her story Knickers to be included in the anthology Foreign and Far Away, and wish her continued success in her writing career. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare Digby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the World Master Powerlifting Championships were held in Orlando, Florida on September 27, 2013, and whereas Paul Gidney from Digby won a gold medal with a deadlift of 295 kilograms, setting a new Canadian record for Masters 2 and Masters 1 over 40 classes. And whereas in addition to his gold medal, Paul finished second in the 105 kilogram Master 2 over 50 weight class, setting a new Canadian record with his grand total of 732.5 kilograms. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate powerlifter Paul Gidney for winning a gold and silver medal at the World Master Powerlifting Championships and wish him continued success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Northside Westmount.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I will move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Riverview Redmen were victorious in the 2013 May Cabuc Memorial Green and Gold Hockey Tournament with a 4-3 victory over King's Edge Hill School of Windsor. And whereas the Redmen erased a 3-2 deficit in the third period when Grant Colburn tied things up, allowing Noah Perry to score the winning goal. And whereas the Memorial Marauders hosted King's Edge Hill, Halifax West, the Glace Bay Panthers, the Sydney Academy Wildcats, the J.H. Gillis Royals, and the J.L. Ilsley Judges of Halifax. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Redmen on their victory and the other participating schools for their providing their top-notch, high-end hockey. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Chester Playhouse celebrates its 75th year in 2013, and whereas as the Chester Playhouse originally provided entertainment as a movie theater, then as a puppet theater, then as a playhouse, which is still operates as today, and whereas the Chester Playhouse remains one of the most well-known small theaters in Atlantic Canada. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Chester Playhouse on its 75th anniversary. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of the Public Service Commission.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Krista Connell, CEO of the Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation, has been named by the Women's Executive Network as a recipient of Canada's Most Powerful Women Top 100 Award. Whereas these awards celebrate and highlight the professional achievements of women across the country in private, public, and not-for-profit sectors at a time when corporate Canada is under growing pressure to promote more female leaders into senior management and corporate director roles. Whereas Crystal Connell has successfully worked to establish a vibrant health research culture that helps to attract and retain top talent and that contributes to Research Hub where academia and business unite. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly extend their congratulations to Krista Connell for her remarkable achievement as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Joe McLean's great success in business began when he opened a carpet store on Ford Street in Stellarton around 1966. And whereas Mr. McLean believes laying carpet on concrete floors is a reason he has required 2 artificial knees. And whereas Mr. McLean supported numerous causes in his community, giving generously of his time and knowledge while introducing the business to 4 of his sons. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Joe McLean, the founder of McLean's Flooring in Stellarton, a prosperous and thriving family business which occurred under his leadership. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Peter Millman and Kyla Gallagher, both 19 years old, are top Canadian champion track and field throwers from Truro, Nova Scotia. And whereas Kyla Gallagher claimed a bronze medal in the women's 4-kilogram hammer event, throwing 56.58 meters at the Pan American Junior Games in Medellin, Colombia, and Peter Millman was 5th in the men's 6-kilogram shot put event, throwing 17.72 meters, and 7th in the 6-kilogram hammer event, throwing 62.63 meters. And whereas Peter Millman and Kayla Gallagher were named as 2 of 74 Canadian athletes to receive their Athletics Canada development cards for 2013-14, which will give them financial assistance and tuition support to help them continue to train and compete at the highest possible level. Therefore, let it be resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Kyla Gallagher and Peter Millman on their athletic pursuits and accomplishments and wishes them continued success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on December 7th, nearly 300 graduates walked across a stage and received their degrees at the fall convocation at St. Francis Xavier University. And whereas 80 of these graduates are leaders from around the world and have completed a program at the world-renowned Coady International Institute. And whereas all these graduates will now take what they've learned and effect positive change around the world. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly commend and congratulate all of the graduates on completing their degree and wish them luck on all of their future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Honourable Calvin Ogilvie is a leading expert in biotechnology, bioorganic chemistry, and genetic engineering, and whereas Senator Calvin Ogilvie was recently awarded a Medal of Honor by the RxND Health Research Foundation, and whereas the medal came with a $20,000 research grant that the former President and Vice Chancellor of Acadia University in Wolfville donated to that institution for the study of healthcare delivery in rural Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Honourable Calvin Ogilvie on his accomplishments and his recognition by the RxND Health Research Foundation. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cheryl Downton received a Bachelor of Social Work degree in 1984 from the Maritime School of Social Work, and the following year went to work at Veith House, a community centre in North End, Halifax. And whereas Cheryl Downton worked at Veith House from 1985 to 2012 as a community social worker and later as acting executive director, and became a well-known advocate for Halifax's poor and marginalized citizens. And whereas Cheryl Downton sadly passed away at the early age of 58 on November 4th, and a celebration of her life was held at Veith House on November 23rd with over 100 people in attendance. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature expresses its appreciation of the life and work of Cheryl Downton and extends its deep sympathy to Cheryl's family, friends, and loved ones. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Guysborough, Eastern Shore, Tracadie.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Days Gone By Bakery of Guysborough celebrated their 15th anniversary on December 4, 2013, and whereas they have built their business through hard work and service, they have been providing Guysborough and surrounding communities with quality service, exceptional food and baked items, and whereas they have built a solid reputation in the community, therefore be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly recognize and congratulate Days Gone By Bakery and send best wishes for their continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Tom Steele, chair of the annual Westville Food Drive, identified a need in his community and brought the Westville Fire Department together with various cadet corps in the area, and whereas this group worked as one to raise $335 in addition to donations of food weighing in at 3,245 pounds, and whereas the event helped those less fortunate and taught a valuable life lesson to the cadets, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize Tom Steele and other volunteers for a job well done and thank them for their effort. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Sydney Whitney Pier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I read this resolution on behalf of the honourable member for Sackville Cobequid. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas earlier this year, Lower Sackville welcomed New Cafe to 799 Sackville Drive, and whereas New Cafe is owned by Seeley Chisholm of Lower Sackville, and whereas New Cafe opened for business on May 14, 2013, and offers customers gourmet coffee and fresh alternatives to fast food. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Lower Sackville's Seeley Chisholm on the launch of New Cafe and extend best wishes for future success. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dartmouth Minor Football Association is a self-funded non-profit organization established in 2006, and whereas this program welcomes male and female athletes aged 6 through 17, regardless of the abilities and experience, and teaches them not only the essence of football, but most importantly, the essence of good character. And whereas on November 16th, 2013, at St. Mary's Husky Stadium, the Dartmouth Destroyers Pee Wee team captured their second provincial team championship. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly join me in congratulating head coach Louis Veloci and the entire Dartmouth Destroyers Pee Wee team on their back-to-back championships and wish them every success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of the notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution, where Mr. Dan Thijan has opened a Scotsburn Country Store and Market in Scotsburn, Pictou County in 2013. And whereas Mr. Thijan, along with his wife Byrne and son Caleb, sell farm supplies, animal feed, showcase local artisans, and of course sell Scotsburn ice cream. And whereas Dan, Byrne, and Caleb are promoting and contributing to the overall community spirit in the village of Scotsburn by creating a hub and gathering place for farmers and community members. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Dan, Byrne, and Caleb on the opening of the Scotsburn Country Store and Market and wish them much success in their business endeavor. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Queens Shelburne.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas for thousands of years, people from Canada's ocean playground have suffered from motion sickness, and in fact, between 30 and 50% of the people suffer from motion sickness when traveling via land, air, or sea. And whereas since this session began, the phrase flip-flop has been used on many occasions to point out the new Liberal government's flip-flops regarding decisions made that are the opposite of their election commitments. And whereas studies show that movement can cause the brain to send conflicting signals to the eyes that don't match those transmitted by the inner ear, throwing off Nova Scotia's sense of balance. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of this House encourage the new Liberal government to stop flip-flopping on their promises made during the election so Nova Scotians can get back to balance by keeping the NDP's programs and policies. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Halifax-Chebucto on an introduction.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw your attention to the East Gallery. We have with us the Executive Director of Camp Brigadoon, David Graham, who's here with Jan LaPierre and Graham Carter, who and his support crew who paddled to Cape Sable Island from Canso. So we'd just like to welcome them to the House. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Graham Carter, whereas Graham Carter completed a kayak trip from Canso to Sable Island to help raise funds to create a specialized camp program for children struggling with chronic mental and physical health issues, and whereas so children from Chisholm House Services for Children can go to proposed program at Camp Brigadoon on Aylesford Lake in Kings County. And whereas he has already helped raise over $30,000 in individual donations, his goal is to be able to send a dozen children to each of the next 2 years, by which time he hopes the camp program will become permanent. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House Assembly congratulate Graham Carter on not only his vision, but also his hard work and determination. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Sydney River, Myra Lewisburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Was it something I said? Whereas Leif Morrison, a Donkin lobster fisherman, recently caught a blue lobster, and whereas the blue lobster caught by Mr. Morrison will join Stan the white lobster at Ripley's Aquarium of Canada, which is being built at the base of the CN Tower. And whereas Leif Morrison caught the blue lobster in Schooner Pond Cove, and he named it Sylvia after his late mother. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Leif on his catch and wish Sylvia a long and happy life at Ripley's Aquarium. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Bike and Bean is a cafe and bike shop located in historic French Village train station, and whereas the Bike Bean was founded by Mary Lou Levanger, who had more than 20 years of experience as a restaurateur in Nova Scotia's best dining rooms, and whereas not only is the Bike and Bean the only bike shop of its kind between Halifax and Lunenburg, but after the owner's passing, staff had continued to honor her by preparing only the finest gourmet coffee and food. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates the Bike and Bean on their commitment to Mary Lou Levanger's vision and their hard work in the community. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic on an introduction.
No, he did the introduction. Yoakum already did the introduction.
Okay, the honourable member for Halifax Atlantic. Scratch the introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jan Sebastian LaPierre, a resident of Halifax Atlantic, a friend and a brother, kayaked from Canso to Sable Island to help raise funds to create a specialized camp program for children struggling with chronic mental and physical health issues, and whereas so children from the Chisholm Services for Children can go to a proposed program at Camp Brigadoon on Aylesford Lake in Kings County, and whereas he has already raised over $30,000 in individual donations, his goal is to be able to send a dozen children in each of the next 2 years, by which time he hopes the camp program can become permanent. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Jan Sebastian LaPierre not only on his vision but also his hard work and determination. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Leo and Denise LeBlanc and their sons Peter and Ben currently operate a fourth-generation farm in Fordview, Inverness County. And whereas Peter and his two sons are presently working with other farmers and processors to increase the amount of locally grown food being consumed by Nova Scotians. And whereas in a recent Business Development Bank of Canada survey, 73% of Atlantic Canadians would prefer to buy local food if given the opportunity. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize family farms like the LeBlancs for providing a stable supply of local food. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
There you go, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ron Meach is a Truro real estate developer and owner of Meach Holdings Limited, and whereas Ron Meach attended Acadia University and played for the Acadia Axemen football team that had a perfect season in 1981 and won the Vanier Cup, and whereas Ron Meach and his fellow Axemen were inducted into the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame in October 2013, therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Ron Meach on being an inductee into the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on a future date, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Tak Kikuchi, who is from the Fall River and founder of the Alta Gymnastic Clubs, has been a driving force in the sport of gymnastics in Nova Scotia and Canada for over 40 years. Whereas Tak Kikuchi, a gymnast coach, judge, administrator, and club developer, was in the Canadian team at 2 Olympic Games, 5 World Championships, 2 Pan Am Games, and 2 Commonwealth Games, and in 2010 he was awarded Gymnastics Canada's Lifetime Membership Award and has been named Coach of the Year at various times by Sports Nova Scotia, Gymnastics Nova Scotia, and Gymnastics Canada. And whereas longtime gymnast coach Tak Kikuchi was inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame in the Builders category for 2013. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House and Assembly congratulate Tak Kikuchi on this well-deserved honor. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Northside Westmount.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I will move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas after more than 25 years, Rowley's Wharf closed its doors, leaving 18 unemployed and taking away a live music venue for local performers and the host site for many charity events. And whereas Rowley's opened its doors in 1988 and has been the host of events such as jet ski races, polar bear swims, motorcycle events, and the odd Tory event, and was well renowned for its Thursday night fiddle night. And whereas a little bit of Cape Breton died when the iconic institution closed its doors, and many will miss Lynn, Rowley, and their staff at the wharf. Therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly join me in saying thanks for the memories to Lynn Rowley and everyone who made the wharf such an institution. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Is done? We'll now move on to orders of the day. Bills for second reading. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call government business bills for second reading?
Government bills for second reading. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 20, the House of Assembly Act?
Bill number 20, an act to amend Chapter 1, 1992 supplement of the Revised Statutes 1989 of the House of Assembly Act. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill 20, Amendments to the House of Assembly Act, now be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in my place today to speak on the bill. These amendments relate to the compensation received by members of this House. As my colleagues know, the House of Assembly Act requires that you, Mr. Speaker, must appoint an independent tribunal to review members' salaries within 60 days of an election. The amendments we're discussing today will broaden the scope of that review quite considerably. The review will not only include salaries, but it will also include housing allowances, constituency allowances, pensions, and all other types of reimbursements pursuant to the House of Assembly Management Commission Act, and all retiring allowances payable to members of the House pursuant to the Members' Retiring Allowances Act. Mr. Speaker, I think everyone in this chamber would agree that Nova Scotians deserve accountability and transparency from their elected officials. As my government made clear in the speech from the throne, we must work to ensure that we are protecting the pillars of democracy and keeping pace with the expectations of our citizens. That is why we've committed to a full and thorough review of every form of compensations that members of the House receive. By expanding this review to include everything at once, Mr. Speaker, we're ensuring that the benefits members receive are fair, responsible, and independently determined by an objective review panel. This is the level of accountability that Nova Scotians expect from us, and it's the accountability we are committing to with this piece of legislation. There's also another item to this legislation that I must draw your attention to. As I mentioned earlier, the current House of Assembly Act requires that you appoint a panel within 60 days of an election, and that the panel reports back to this House within 90 days from an election. As the amendments we're discussing today are expansive and require an extension on the deadline, Mr. Speaker, under the new legislation, you'll be required to appoint a 3-person review panel on or before December 31st, and that is the end of this month, and the panel to submit its report to you by the end of March of next year. In other words, they will have about 3 months to complete their work. The legislation will also allow you to grant the panel an extension if you so deem it necessary. I think my colleagues would agree that the most important thing here is not to do the review quickly, but to do it correctly. So we want to give this panel the time they need to do their work thoroughly and completely. Mr. Speaker, I know all my colleagues in this House are committed to serving their constituents to the best of their abilities, and I believe this legislation is the important and proper step to assure Nova Scotians that we are holding ourselves accountable, that we are being fiscally responsible in our use of public funds, and that we are devoted to serving the public good. I look forward to the debate on this legislation, and I look forward to seeing it receive the support of this House unanimously. And I'm sure you will also be pleased, Mr. Speaker, to have the opportunity to appoint the panel for this important work. With those words, I will take my seat. Thank you very much.
If I'm to recognize the Minister of Justice, it will be to close debate on Bill number 20. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I so move to close the debate.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 20, an act to amend Chapter 1, 1992, supplement of the Revised Statutes, 1989, the House of Assembly Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 20, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1, 1992 Supplement of the Revised Statutes 1989, the House of Assembly Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would you please now call Bill number 19, the Trade Union Act?
Bill number 19, an act to amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 19... I recognize the Honourable Member for Fairview Clayton Park on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to draw the members' attention to the East Gallery, where Jillian McDonald, a very active volunteer in Fairview Clayton Park's constituency office, is joining us tonight. I would ask her to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Okay. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill 19, an act to amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Trade Union Act, now be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, after hearing from many Nova Scotian businesses across the province, we committed to making changes to first contract arbitration. Our business operators should be able to focus on employing Nova Scotians, growing their businesses, and giving back to their communities. It's in everyone's best interest when employers, employees, and unions can resolve their differences through collective bargaining and without labor disruptions. Mr. Speaker, we are following through on our commitment to restore balance and responsibility to first contract arbitration. The existing legislation involves the Labour Board too quickly. It gives the parties automatic access to first contract arbitration simply by running out a 120-day clock. We said we would fix these problems, and that's what we're doing. Amending the Trade Union Act will ensure the Labour Board can only impose a first agreement if it determines one of the parties is not making its best effort to reach a first agreement. The changes will remove the time limits on conciliation and eliminate automatic access to first contract arbitration, giving employers and employees more time to try to negotiate affordable agreements. The conciliator must now determine that the parties are at an impasse before the matter can go to the Labour Board. If the Labour Board finds the parties are making their best effort to bargain, it may direct the parties back to conciliation. But if the Labour Board determines the parties qualify for first contract arbitration, it can appoint an outside arbitrator, or the parties can choose to appear before the Labour Board and cover their own costs. Mr. Speaker, these amendments will restore balance to the process. They will bring Nova Scotia's legislation more in line with the model used by the federal government and several other provinces. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the rare instances when employers, employees, and unions struggle to negotiate a first agreement, a more balanced process will be in place to help. These changes ensure that first contract arbitration is a tool of last resort. Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, members of the business community spoke out against Bill 102. Luke Erzsébek of the Restaurant and Food Services Association was one of those people. He said the business community was galvanized against his first contract legislation 2 years ago. When we introduced these amendments last week, Mr. Erzsébek said he was pleased to see the changes we were proposing. He said the amendments are a positive signal to the business community. And Mr. Speaker, he said this government listened and acted quickly to bring Nova Scotia's first contract process more in line with other Canadian jurisdictions. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to move this legislation for second reading today. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise to speak about Bill 19. As all members know, the Progressive Conservative Caucus led the charge against first contract arbitration when the NDP imposed it in 2011. Back then, we believed it was a bad bill, and our opinion hasn't changed. It's a bill that solves a problem that doesn't exist. We are fortunate in this province to have a history of relative labor peace. There is no persistent or ongoing labor discontent. The province had 20 years of a fair and balanced labor market. First contract arbitration is a bill that endangers our already shaky economy, as we all witness on a daily basis. Back in 2011, we heard what the province's largest employers thought about first contract arbitration, and they didn't like it, and they still don't. Sobeys Vice President of Human Resources called first contract arbitration totally unnecessary and said it would damage the province's reputation as an excellent place to work and to carry on business, and I will table that document. Dana LeBlanc of Michelin has this to say about first contract arbitration. We do not want it. We do not want any third party who knows nothing about our business deciding our employment terms and conditions and risks subjecting us to costs that we cannot afford. That would leave us with very few options, and I will table that document as well. Mr. LeBlanc went on to say, it makes my job and other people's job very difficult to sell Nova Scotia as a better place to invest than many of the other sites Michelin has around the world. Clearwater President Colin MacDonald could not understand why the government introduced the legislation in the first place, saying, there are other issues the government needs to deal with without riling up the business community, and I will table that document as well. Egg Studios, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with in this area, were the unfortunate guinea pigs for first contract arbitration. The contract imposed on Egg would drive up wages and benefits by 25% to 30% and threatens the business future in the province, and I will table that document as well. Basically, first contract arbitration kills jobs. Let's face it, it's a bad policy. This bill tinkers with a bad policy. To take a bad policy and water it down doesn't make it a good policy. Anything that risks jobs is not a risk worth taking. After all, Nova Scotia has 2,400 fewer jobs and 2,600 fewer people in the labor force than this time last year. Now is the time to concentrate on creating jobs. It's not the time to be fiddling with job-killing legislation. Thank you very much.
The Honourable House Leader for the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I suppose I do agree with the previous speaker. It is fiddling, but from a whole different perspective. And I guess for the record, too, Mr. Speaker, that the issue around egg films is one about the issues of who's in and who's out of the union. It's not an issue of first contract. So for the record, let's get that straight. Mr. Speaker, in first contract, the reality is that in order to even get there, you have to pass that bar of getting certified. Now, I would say to you, Mr. Speaker, that this province, and I've had the privilege of organizing trade unions in this province and outside this province through provincial legislation and federal legislation, and without fear of being told differently, Mr. Speaker, I would say to you that Nova Scotia ranks in the top 2 or 3 the hardest provinces to organize in because of the tests you have to meet. So, Mr. Speaker, you've got to see first contract legislation through that lens. The lens is that you've passed this huge hurdle. Now you've got to get to the table and get an agreement. Mr. Speaker, the idea that first contract, as portrayed by some as a job killer, is just not so, because like I said, Mr. Speaker, you have to get that very hard test, very, very difficult test of collective, to get to even start collective bargaining, because there's no such thing as card check in this province. There's no automatic certification, Mr. Speaker. It's very, 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 very difficult province in which to organize. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, it's been a tactic, if you will, by people at the table to elongate collective bargaining, and part of that is to run, as they would say, run out the clock. And that's been used many times in this province, Mr. Speaker. I would submit that, you know, to you, the need of this legislation today is because, and, you know, we were told that businesses would flee and so on, and that hasn't happened, Mr. Speaker. So I really don't understand the need for this legislation. But the real issue here, Mr. Speaker, will be that the bill basically, in basic terms, says that you will, a contract will be imposed after bad faith bargaining, because that's basically what it does. Now, Mr. Speaker, again, I'll rely on my years of experience previous to this House, and say to you, if in this province, if there's an issue of organizing is difficult, then 10 times harder is to prove bad faith bargaining. It's a very difficult bar, because you've got to go. The employer or indeed the bargaining unit, the person representing the group representing the bargaining units, you've got to find hard fact that they did something purposely to impede getting a collective agreement and did it for less than honest reasons, Mr. Speaker, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. So I would think that the Progressive Conservative Party should actually be fairly happy with this bill, because with the way this is written, it will basically do away with first contract in this province. And that's a shame, because I think the women and men who have asked for certification and met that test will be denied this useful tool in their toolbox, Mr. Speaker. You know, by the fact that an employer was used erroneously in trying to prove that this was the reason, this was the harm being done to an employer, that it was first contract, and it wasn't. It tells me that that's the lack of understanding that party has when it comes to collective bargaining. You know, it's an emotional issue right across this province, Mr. Speaker. I mean, we can go back to the days of the Michelin Bill, and we can go back to all those things, and so they are, to portray collective bargaining in this province as a walk in the park, so to speak, Mr. Speaker, is truly inaccurate. It's something that, you know, you see time and time again, Mr. Speaker. You see where certifications will fall by the wayside because that there's no avenue open to the to either party to try to accelerate this. Because what first contract would do and does do, Speaker, it allows that period of time for both parties to work under a collective agreement and get to see how the system works and, you know, how they can get along. I mean, the reality is it gives you the mechanism for first contract, but it doesn't give you any mechanism for second. So, I mean, if the two parties cannot get to a meaningful resolution of collective bargaining, then there's those other issues that take place as approved by the Trade Union Act, and that would be, in most cases, the ability for a strike or a lockout, Mr. Speaker. So you have those issues, and that's where they can be. You know, that's a hammer that people really do not want to use. You know, I often hear when people talk about the trade union movement. They say, oh, strikes. But, you know, again, Mr. Speaker, there's an old adage that it's much easier to get people on the picket line than to get them off the picket line. That's the reality of it. Once out there, you're negotiating with somewhat with a clock ticking, and the one is that does the employees who are affected, do they leave and seek employment elsewhere? Does the strike itself cause harm to the employer, and it causes such an economic issue that they move on themselves, Mr. Speaker? So, you know, people are cognizant of that. On both sides, most reasonable people, or I guess by definition, reasonable people, not just most, but reasonable people, see that, Mr. Speaker. They see that we have to justify this. We do not want to withdraw our services, and the employer says, look, we really don't want to lock our doors. But in the odd case, Speaker, there are times of a first contract where both parties are finding their way, that this would allow for a much larger and better cooling off period. And the cooling off period would actually be a time, Speaker, when they would work together and find out how this goes. I mean, most collective agreements, especially the first ones, it's a framework, Speaker, and then it's built on. You would have, in essence, you have what people would refer to as mature agreements, agreements that are probably have been collectively bargained, say, 5 to 10 times. And these are, after you get that going, it's usually just shaping a few things, maybe adding or taking a step out of the grievance process, Speaker, or obviously one that's always ever present for most people would be wages. But you know, the mature agreements would really maybe talk in terms of benefits. We just Friday sent a bill over to law amendments on the statutory holiday time. How's that holiday paid for? Is it, do you negotiate double time? How do you do that if you're saying your day off and you're called out in that statutory holiday? What should be your reimbursement for that? So they're the ones what I would say fall under the category of a mature agreement, and employers and so on are used to working with that. Now, first contract, it's kind of a new venture for both parties, by and large, Mr. Speaker. Some of them can be like a larger company that has a subsidiary that may be organized, and they have a human resource department that would handle some of the collective bargaining for them. And so these things aren't new, but for those that aren't, these are issues that time to time, whether it's depending on the size of the employer or the size of the union itself, what they would do, they may bring in someone to help them collectively bargain. That person may be a member of the bar, or maybe somebody else who has been associated with collective bargaining and have put up their shingle, so to speak, Mr. Speaker. So, but a lot of times in there, it's to find a way to get people to understand, can we work together in a collective bargaining process with a collective agreement in effect. And that's what I believe first contract does. By these amendments, I believe will erode that and make it very much a toothless tiger. I believe that the way it sits today, it works. It works well, Mr. Speaker, and therefore our party will not be supporting this bill going forward. Thank you.
If I'm to recognize the Honourable Minister of Labour, it will be to close debate on Bill number 19. The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the members opposite for their considered comments. I now move that debate on Bill 19 now be closed.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 19, an act to amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989 of the Trade Union Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 19, entitled an act to amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call government business, government motions, address in reply?
We'll now have address in reply. I recognize the Honourable Member for Guysborough, Eastern Shore, Tracadie.
It's a big writing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise with a sense of honor and humble gratitude to stand in this historic place to address my honourable colleagues representing the residents of Nova Scotia's largest geographical riding, the new riding of Guysborough, Eastern Shore, Tracadie. It is a privilege to serve with my fellow Liberal members, of course, but also with each and every member of this House. In particular, the many I have known and worked together with during my time in municipal government. And particular congratulations to you, Mr. Speaker, on your appointment, the wisdom of which you are displaying with great ability, evident in this sitting, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the road to this place is far from being a straight line, and along the way there are many places where you need help. I want to mention briefly some of those who provided that help recently and over the years. I must start with my lovely wife, Patricia, of 37 years, who has been my solid rock in all that we have accomplished together, and without whose encouragement and indulgence, I would not be standing before you today, Mr. Speaker. Together, we raised 4 children, Sarah, Shannon, Victoria, and our son, Regan, who have shared in every up and down of my political career, spanning 11 elections, Mr. Speaker. They have always been there, believing in what I have been attempting to accomplish. Thank you very much, my wonderful family. And of course, I must mention the super group of believing individuals who are my campaign team. Faced with a new riding, which is vast, we had to build and rebuild networks in areas new to all, but the energetic people who came to my side made it happen. Close to 100 people came to work on our team, and each one shares in our victory, Mr. Speaker. People like Shirley, Dan, Bruce, Monica, Shelley, Ed, Cheryl, Milt, Moira, and countless others, including, Mr. Speaker, the granddaughter of my great friend and great Nova Scotian, a man familiar to this House, the late A.M. Sandy Cameron. I will be eternally grateful to you all. Thanks to all in the provincial campaign who worked flawlessly to answer every question with an inspiring calmness, thorough knowledge, and instant responsiveness. For a busy candidate, such support is priceless. Throughout the campaign, our team kept up a constant contact with our neighboring ridings. And I wish to thank those members for the common vision and cooperation throughout the writ period. And one last tip of the hat to my former council colleagues and staff at the municipality of the District of Guysborough, many of whom were with me for 25 years, for all the ambient support in your manners and good wishes. It means a lot. And the bonus for you is that you're rid of me once and for all from your council table. I should mention, Mr. Speaker, that since the election, they were able to have a by-election, elect a new councillor to replace me, and elected a new warden for the municipality. So much for being indispensable, Mr. Speaker. Finally, thank you to our Premier, who accepted my candidacy for a second time and provided constant support throughout the run. It is a great honor to serve in a government led by this man. Now, I want to take you on a short journey through the beautiful and diverse riding of Guysborough Eastern Shore Tracadie. Beginning on the northern shore of our great province, on St. George's Bay, in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, Mr. Speaker, at the venerable port of East Tracadie, from whose wharf our fishermen still ply their ancient trade, around Cape Jack past Haverbush, along the Strait of Canso to one of Canada's most prominent man-made features, the Canso Causeway. When this construction marvel was completed in 1955, an incredible benefit, aside from the ease of access to and from Cape Breton, was created. Prior to that time, the annual drift ice from the Gulf blocked the Strait of Canso for extended periods, making the deepest port on the east coast of North America unusable for several months of the year and severely limiting its utility. The new causeway acted as a dam against the ice and has opened up this port for use year-round, which has seen significant industry migrate to the Strait, bringing jobs and good economy to the region. The Strait continues to be recognized for its potential with an international container terminal under development for Melfort in Guysborough Municipality. East Asian interests are in the area scouting for liquefied natural gas sites, Mr. Speaker, and other exciting business opportunities are in the hopper. Wind turbines are now turning on both sides of the Strait, a testament to the many natural advantages the region holds. Next door to the causeway lies the beautiful port town of Mulgrave, long celebrated as the ferry access to Cape Breton and a prolific fishing area. Strategically located close to proposed developments and hosting an international nutraceutical company, DSM, Mulgrave lies poised for growth. Continuing southeast past Steep Creek and Sand Point, we move past the point at Red Head and pass into Chedabucto Bay on the Atlantic, one of the largest bays on Canada's east coast. Continuing along the coast past the sandy beaches of Clam Harbour and Hadley Beach, we reach the sheltered port of Guysborough, the shire town of the municipality of the District of Guysborough, and a bustling community in its own right. Home to the Mulgrave Road Theatre and Chedabucto Place Performance Centre, it has a lively cultural community and tireless volunteers, Mr. Speaker. Together with a good presence of government services, entrepreneurial efforts abound. The Days Gone By Bakery and Restaurant just celebrated 15 years of successful service, and local businesses work hard to provide service to the many surrounding communities. Recently, Mr. Speaker, Authentic Seacoast has expanded its beer brewing business, is now listed in the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission, opened a superb coffee roaster, and is busy planning a craft distillery for a spring of 2014 construction, providing badly needed jobs to a rural community. Near the shire town, we find three of Nova Scotia's largest African Nova Scotian communities, Sunnyville, Lincolnville, and Upper Big Tracadie. These residents, whose ancestors date back over 250 years, display their proud traditions with such facilities as the African Canadian Heritage and Friendship Centre, housed in the local school, and annual festivals celebrating their proud heritage. These communities are particularly proud of their African Nova Scotian Council representative, Councillor Sheila Pelly, District Councillor, for the solid representation that she delivers. Heading east on Route 16, we pass through the historic community of Queensport with its iconic island lighthouse, through Hazel Hill, the first Canadian home of Western Union's transatlantic cable site, and enter the oldest fishing area in North America, the historic and proud community of Canso. Home to National Historic Site, Grassy Island, which was the staging area for the British siege of Louisbourg, Mr. Speaker, Canso is now an important renewable energy site with the soon-to-be turning turbines of the Sable Wind Farm. To say nothing of the incredible fishing industry currently leading the pack with the development of Nova Scotia's only trapped fish shrimp fishery. Around Glasgow Head is tucked in the vibrant community of Little Dover, home to several dozen lobster licenses that drive the economy, Mr. Speaker. Around the bay to Whitehead and into Tor Bay, where Captain Savalette entertained Samuel de Champlain, Mr. Speaker, in 1608. Savalette, who at that point said he had been coming to that bay for many years, harvested the rich waters for fish, which he transported back to France. La communauté prochaine est la belle ville de Rivière-de-Larry, maison à la Société des Acadiens de la région de Torbay. Nous sommes très enchantés à cette acadienne communauté qui maintenant ouvert un nouveau musée, la Salle des Acadiens. Along the coast, through many more historic communities, too numerous to name, takes us to Goldboro. Named originally for the great Nova Scotia gold play of the 19th century, and now the host community to the first offshore natural gas development in this country, Mr. Speaker. Now hosting a second gas project in Canada's Deep Panuke, first gas from those reservoirs is expected to be announced any day. And further still, host to an active application to locate Eastern Canada's first liquefied natural gas export terminal at that port. Goldboro, truly Nova Scotia's energy hub, Mr. Speaker. Moving west through the deep fjord known as Country Harbour, we reach Stormont, sporting the landing spot for Mercy Seafood's Greenland shrimp fishery. That's a huge fishery, Mr. Chairman, employing many, many people in the area. Further west, we travel across the ferry to Port Bickerton with its very active Lighthouse Society to the Shire town of the municipality of the District of St. Mary's, historic Sherbrooke. Here sits the Nova Scotia Museum's historic Sherbrooke Village, a living museum of world renown, Mr. Speaker. I would truly invite members to take a relaxing ride and visit Nova Scotia's Liscombe Lodge in nearby Liscombe and try their famous planked salmon. Continuing along to number 7, we pass through Seaside Marie Joseph to Ecum Secum, marking the border into the municipality number 5, Mr. Speaker, that comprises the Guysborough Eastern Shore Tracadie riding, Halifax Regional Municipality. Onward through Necomtah, Moser River, the Quaddies, Port Dufferin, home to the soon-to-be producing gold mine at Dufferin Mines, being developed by Resources Appalaches. And now we enter into the outskirts of the anchor community of Eastern Halifax Regional Municipality, Sheet Harbour. Sheet Harbour is a busy and bustling community serving a large catchment area. It serves as the business centre and service centre for the large region. An extremely active and effective Board of Trade, led by the business community, provides yeoman service for the area. Along a great renewable energy centre, harnessing the hydropower from the east and west rivers as they flow into the Atlantic, the area remains an important contributor to the provincial power grid. Centre for an active arts community and host to one of the province's best ports, Sheet Harbour Port, the future is bright for this great area. Pushing still westward, Mr. Speaker, we pass through the lovely tourist areas of Spry Bay, Mushaboom, Tangier, Murphy's Cove, arriving at the westernmost boundary of this magnificent riding at East Ship Harbour, at Newcomb's Brook, and the beginning boundary of the riding represented by our Speaker. So there you have it, Mr. Speaker, a journey of over 500 kilometres, over 5,100 square kilometres, and home to approximately 10,500 electors. Please grant me your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, to speak about our strong people and their economy. With almost 20% of Nova Scotia's coast, it is therefore obvious that the importance of the fishery is paramount to our people. Inshore and offshore landings are significant, and over 300 lobster fishers under license risk life and limb in the pursuit of Nova Scotia's sweetest crustaceans found in these eastern shore pristine waters. Oh, no debate on that. Good. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this fishery represents our last bastion against out-migration, with young men and women staying in their home communities to continue the family tradition of fishing, blessing our schools with their children, and being economic generators in their respective communities. And then there is the forestry, Mr. Speaker. Centuries of stewardship of our forests by our predecessors gifted us with viable forests, Mr. Speaker, which, with careful husbandry, will continue to be productive for future generations. Farming is an important vocation in the riding, Mr. Speaker, with dairy, beef, huge blueberry production, and thousands of acres of balsam fir Christmas tree production that has supplemented incomes for decades. All these activities have helped create an incredible tourist product throughout the riding as the natural advantage of great rivers and intriguing coastal areas catch the traveler's imagination and bring visitors to our communities for experiential tourism. So these are the traditional industries in the riding, Mr. Speaker, but let's turn our attention to the future. Starting with energy, the Sable Offshore Energy Project has been heating homes and businesses throughout Atlantic Canada since 2000. A $2 billion offshore investment has landed on the riding shores at Goulborough with the Encana Deep Panuke gas project. It's nearing first gas, and together with the Sable project, will put millions of dollars more into the royalty coffers of the province. And because Goulborough is the beginning point of the Maritime Northeast Transmission Pipeline, that piece of infrastructure has attracted investors who plan to establish Eastern Canada's first liquefied natural gas export terminal, Mr. Speaker. Some facts about this project, Mr. Speaker. Send-out capacity up to 10 million tons per year. Capital expenditures 5 to 10 billion Canadian. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I did say billion. Up to 3,500 workers for 36 to 42 months to build the facility. 200 direct jobs in the operating state and countless spin-off opportunities for small business. This project is now before the Nova Scotia Department of Environment for environmental assessment, and recently an application was prepared for the National Energy Board for an import-export permit for that project, Mr. Speaker. And on the renewable side, ComFit turbines are producing income for residents, and a 13.8 megawatt wind farm is under construction near Hazel Hill and Canso. The mining sector is very important to the riding, Mr. Speaker, with a renewed gold mine scheduled for operation in early 2014, which will employ 78 people at Dufferin Mines in the Sheet Harbour region. Martin Marietta operates Eastern Canada's largest aggregate mine at Cape Porcupine near Alls Cove, employing just shy of 100 people. A second aggregate export development is in the advanced planning stages on Tidewater, just 11 kilometers from the community of Canso, with a projected workforce of 80 and a capital cost approaching $100 million. Another prolific gold deposit at Goulborough is being proven up, and Orex Corporation, a gold developer, is preparing to file a permit for a 10,000-ton bulk sample, which will confirm the future mine's viability. And then, Mr. Speaker, on the Strait of Canso at Melfort, we have a well-advanced proposal for an international container terminal on that wonderful ice-free deep-water port that I mentioned was made possible by the advent of the Canso Causeway. The capital projection for that project, Mr. Speaker, is $400 million, 200 jobs in the operating phase, and we in rural Nova Scotia need those jobs to build the economy back for this province. Woven throughout the economy of the riding is the ever-present tourism industry. Along the shore from East Ship Harbour through to Sherbrooke, through to Canso, with its famous Stan Rogers Festival, which I invite all the House to take in. It's a marvelous activity. Along the shore to East Tracadie lies some of Canada's most scenic geography. Unique tourist businesses have their shingles out, showing strong spirit to entertain the incredulous visitors who are enchanted by the spectacular beauty. Authentic Seacoast at Guysborough is one of those businesses who is making a significant mark with its various offerings, including a coffee roaster, served here recently in the House, Mr. Speaker, their coffee, an internet cafe and trading company featuring decadent pastries created on site, a craft brewery, soon to be joined by a craft distillery, all of which contributes to more jobs for our important rural economy. I look forward with vigor and excitement to representing the wonderful people of Guysborough Eastern Shore Tracadie in this historic assembly. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to address this House of Assembly today and represent my hometown that I've lived in for more than 20 years of my life. I've shared incredible memories with my family, friends, and neighbors in the area through things like going through the school system, playing competitive sports, as a member of various church congregations, and being involved in several community organizations. I look forward to the opportunity to be the collective voice for my hometown, my brothers and sisters in Hammonds Plains, Lucasville. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to mention that I'm grateful for the privilege to work in this House with the representatives on all sides of the House, who have all demonstrated in one way or another their ability to encourage their constituents, who have a great deal of knowledge and experience in their respective former careers, and the abilities which I believe have the potential to contribute to the improvements of our province as a whole. I also just wanted to just take a quick moment to, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a point to recognize the member from Pictou West for inspiring such an impressive voter turnout in her riding. I think that we should recognize that as a House. Bravo. I hope that we can all continue to inspire Nova Scotians and, you know, get some more people out to the polls next time around. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to be a part of this House Assembly filled with former lawyers, first responders, farmers, educators, municipal representatives, entrepreneurs, as well as the former members of the House, and more. I'm additionally grateful that we're accompanied by the member from Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley, and the member to my left from Sackville-Beaverbank. Honestly, gentlemen, pray for us. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians deserve nothing except our best, and I look forward to our collective contributions to change. I hope that we can move toward enhancing this province, modernizing this legislature, achieving the best possible results for our province through constructive debate, and restoring the faith of a declining voting population. Mr. Speaker, I want to share a few interesting points with regards to my community and, you know, pieces that contribute to why I'm very proud to be the representative for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville. Upper Hammonds Plains is home to Pockwalk Lake, perhaps more commonly known as the Pockwalk Watershed, where HRM gets its drinking water. Hammonds Plains is home to the Wallace Hills Indian Reserve, historically a stopping place for the Micmac First Nations. Mr. Speaker, the Upper Hammonds Plains Volunteer Fire Department, originally opened by 48 volunteers in 1966, was officially established in 1970, therefore making Upper Hammonds Plains the home to the first all-black fire department in Canada. Upper Hammonds Plains is additionally the home of now retired Lieutenant Gina Jones Wilson, who was the first female African-Canadian to achieve a Level 1 firefighting certification in our province and continues to be an activist within their community. The Upper Hammonds Plains Volunteer Fire Department was made possible by the efforts of the local community. The Ladies Auxiliary from Emmanuel Baptist Church contributed to the fundraising efforts, and the land for the fire hall was donated by community resident Mrs. Elizabeth Mantley. Elizabeth's daughter, Doreen Mantley, still lives in Upper Hammonds Plains, is a fantastic person and an incredible cook. Though I will state for the record that my mom still holds the title. Speaking of Emmanuel, Emmanuel Baptist Church, or EBC, the meeting place, celebrates the rich legacy of its founding members, freed black refugees of the War of 1812, who first settled in Upper Hammonds Plains. This place of celebration is truly a central point in our community and beyond. People come from far and wide to be a part of this experience, and whether you're deeply religious or not, the people who make up the congregation at Emmanuel, led by Pastor Leonard Anderson, are the most welcoming group I have ever met, and I encourage everyone in this house and anywhere to make a point to attend a service, as our Premier did the first Sunday of the election. Mr. Speaker, I need to make a sincere thank you to the congregation at EBC. For Sundays were an opportunity to reflect, relax, and recharge during the months leading up to and throughout the campaign. The strength that carried me because of my participation at Emmanuel was integral to the success of my campaign. I'm happy to say that such a powerful place filled with incredible people is in Hammonds Plains, Lucasville, just up the road, and I look forward to continue being a part of the celebration. Again, these are only a few significant pieces of my community's history, and I look forward to the opportunity to learn more. Mr. Speaker, I represent a newly formed riding. The redistribution of the provincial boundaries formed Hammonds Plains, Lucasville. A riding that incorporates more exclusively the place that I've called home. This was a major contribution to why I decided to put my name forward. I have great confidence speaking on our behalf, and I'm committed to doing so. I grew up in HPL playing competitive sports, for example, for Tassel Minor Hockey, Halifax County United Soccer, Hammonds Plains Soccer, as well as I also played for the Bay Ducks organization in the Maritime Junior League. I want to thank the people who continue to make these organizations successful and enable opportunities for wellness through sport in our community. Mr. Speaker, Hammonds Plains Lucasville is a community that is home to more than 10 extended families of mine, which is extremely inspirational. I'm privileged to be connected to so many wonderful people throughout my riding, for example, through church, sport, school, family, and various community groups. The election campaign was a great opportunity to meet new people, reconnect with people I hadn't seen for quite some time, and hear their collective testimonial, which supported a lot of what I understood about the area. Our community is a site for many small businesses and hard-working entrepreneurs. It is additionally a thoroughfare to the Lighthouse route and the beautiful South Shore region of the province, though I will add a thoroughfare whether the road can handle it or not, just as a shortcut. The area comprised mainly of, but not limited to, young families and senior citizens. It is evident, based on our demographics, that this is a community where parents are eager to raise their family, and senior citizens, many of who have raised their families in their community, intend to spend their retirement. I am confident in my understanding of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and our challenges. I look forward to expressing them in this chamber throughout this mandate and working hard to ensure that we maximize our opportunities in HPL. Mr. Speaker, before I delve into the concerns of Hammonds Plains Lucasville, I need to take a moment to recognize some of the people that contributed their time, talents, and treasure, helping me put together my campaign, a successful campaign. Bill Crowley was my campaign manager. Daryl Jessam was my official agent. Daryl's also my father. And a former colleague of the member from Pictou East. Ben McDonald, he was the assistant to the official agent. Jillian McDonald, Ben's sister, was the candidate scheduler. Ariel Goff was our social media and website chair. Matthew Heffler was our written communications. Rob McLaughlin was our sign chair. Terry Bent, Kathy Baker, and Clark Swim were our office managers. Cameron Stoddard was our volunteer coordinator. John Jessam, my brother, and Callie Butler were fundraising co-chairs. Eric Mistal, our Get Out the Vote coordinator. Joseph Landry and Brian Gaisley, our election night coordinators. Peter Covert, my mother Pam, my two other brothers, Nicholas and Matthew. Frankly, there's a number of individuals that I could continue to address, but I just felt compelled to mention these people in particular. We're a group that didn't have the most experience in the world, but we all had various abilities which really contributed to a fantastic team. I hope that everybody will stay committed, stay engaged, and recognize that we can all add a lot of value to any room that we go into, and I look forward and hope that they'll be around in 4 years' time. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned the fact that I lived in Hammonds Plains, Lucasville for the majority of my life, so I have a pretty firm understanding of the lay of the land, and my canvassing efforts were certainly an emphasis on what I understand, and I'm going to share some of the things that I heard at the doorsteps. Firstly, our subdivisions have grown exponentially and continue to blossom in Hammonds Plains, Lucasville. Despite population declining in many places around the province, our community continues to explode with new residents. While I appreciate and understand the desire to move to our community, the scary fact is the means of safe transportation has barely enhanced over time. I won't complain about paving other than on the Pock Walk Road. But in Hammonds Plains, Lucasville, the Hammonds Plains and Lucasville roads are a commuter's nightmare and a daily threat. There are presently 20,000 plus vehicles that travel on the two-lane Hammonds Plains Road daily. Mr. Speaker, the Hammonds Plains and Lucasville thoroughfares are of utmost concern to residents. Having spent the majority of my life here, experiencing little change, and reading through some of the testimonials of former representatives of this House of Assembly who have addressed the same concern, I wonder, what's it going to take for someone to react and enable the upgrade that we need so desperately? The safety of our children waiting for the school bus and the safety of our hard-working Nova Scotians commuting to work to provide for their families, for example, is a perpetually escalating problem and needs to be addressed by the province in conjunction with other municipal and federal partners. Secondly, anxiety around the education system is major. For example, the size of classes, lacking resources for educators, support staff, and administrators, and the strains that are placed on these individuals and the students they teach are all genuine concerns that I hear door to door. Mr. Speaker, there are so many who are more than capable and committed to enhancing the lives of the next generation through education, but they need our help. We can do so much more as a province to ensure that young Nova Scotians maximize their potential in the classroom and evolve into the leaders of tomorrow. I am thrilled that there's so much emphasis in this room with regards to prioritizing education, restoring financial cuts, and in particular, updating the curriculum. Frankly, I'm hoping and willing to advocate for consideration for mandatory courses, especially at the secondary level, pertaining to current issues, economics, and financial literacy. Thirdly, the state of the economy in Nova Scotia is of grave concern, and the people of Hammonds Plains, Lucasville are no strangers to this reality. Businesses and residents in our community have concerns regarding our tax dollars, how much it costs for businesses to function, and for an individual family to own and maintain a house. There is also present concern for economic expansion in terms of job creation, which I realize is a problem recognized throughout the province, and that there is much determination in this room to keep my generation, the next generation, and skilled workers in general from migrating. Mr. Speaker, healthcare is another huge concern for residents in Hammonds Plains, Lucasville, in particular with regards to wait times, the pressure placed on frontline healthcare, and the means by which we provide long-term and end-of-life care for our seniors. Additionally, I'd like to emphasize the need for this House of Assembly to place emphasis on increasing our capacity for supporting Nova Scotians with various cognitive abilities and mental illness. This includes, but isn't limited to, autistic youth trying to fit into classrooms and social circles, including young adults feeling depressed and alone as they transition from adolescence into adulthood in a world with seemingly insurmountable expectations, including mothers and fathers who are feeling the weight of family pressures and ensuring their children have the best possible future, including veterans returning from service after having faced the ultimate sacrifice to protect our rights and freedoms, and including a senior population that is increasingly suffering from cases of dementia. Mr. Speaker, I won't ignore the recognition for its existence and the work that has been accomplished surrounding mental illness in the recent past. However, as someone who lost one of his best friends to depression, I really want to express for the record. For many challenged with mental illness, negative public stigma is deathly isolating. Our collective inability to recognize someone in need is likely based on ignorance. But the more depression and suicide continues, the more we walk the line of insensitivity. Our present ability to help individuals seek adequate support, individuals who need our listening ear and helping hand more than ever, is lacking and for me, completely unacceptable. There's so much more we can contribute, and as a member of this government, I ask everyone in this room to help me grab this beast by the horn so that our brothers and sisters can get the support they need to tame their demons. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to close very simply by thanking everyone who made it possible for me to be here today and say that I'm looking forward to being a part of the solution. I'm committed to working hard. I'm committed to doing my part, playing my role, and doing whatever it takes to be a good part of Team Nova Scotia and ensuring our success. Thank you for the opportunity to submit my address in reply to the speech from the throne. Peace and God bless.
The honourable member for Sackville-Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great honor and pride to stand here today and present my response to the speech from the throne. I was extremely pleased to know the first time that I sat in the House to see that the House still opens in prayer. And I was a bit surprised, but surprised in a very good way. I come from a family of 14. Both my mother and father are deceased. There are 14 in my family, 9 girls, 5 boys. To date, we have lost 2 sisters, or 3 sisters rather. No, 2 sisters. Kathleen, Kay, Brenda, and my oldest brother, Bernard. Growing up wasn't easy as my mother was a stay-at-home mom that through her death I am only beginning to know her. My father worked as a concrete finisher for many years until he had a severe stroke and was hospitalized for over a year. Mr. Speaker, after being released from the hospital, he began physiotherapy, which helped him to relearn how to walk. He worked hard, determined to recover, enabling him to take care of his children. In the end, he had a noticeable limp on the left side of his body, also permanent paralysis to his left arm that restricted him to raise it completely. Knowing that he could not return to his original profession, fate would have it that a local golf course was about to open next door to our home. When Dad learned that they were looking for employees, he decided to apply for a position. It turned out that the experience that was required, Dad had gained many years before working at home and also by working on various farms in the Woodlawn area. Dad spent many years at the Sackville Golf Course until he retired. I can still remember as a little boy sitting on his lap as we steered the cage tractor while picking up golf balls at the driving range. Mr. Speaker, although I come from a family of 14, the first 7 who were much older than I had already left home and a few already had families of their own. They were all real blessings as they were the ones who took care of the home while Dad was hospitalized. Being the oldest boy at home required many responsibilities at a young age. At home, we had pigs, chickens, and horses. It is amazing how so many things can be accomplished when everyone works together. I am told that I began working at the Sackville Golf Course when I was 10 years old. That is where I learned many things from many people. Mr. Speaker, as a young boy, I would often dream about what I was going to do when I grew up. How was I going to turn out? Was I always going to be poor and struggle as my parents did? Sometimes things that I take for granted today were hardly imaginable at the time of my growing up. Who would have thought that people would have enough faith in me to be their voice in the House of Assembly for Nova Scotia? I feel that I am blessed to be the voice as an elected official for the community in which I grew up, a community that I am so very proud of. Sackville Beaverbank is a new riding, which I am the first MLA to ever be elected. Sackville is made up of 3 distinctive parts: lower, middle, and upper. Adjacent to upper and middle Sackville, we also have Beaverbank. All of these areas hold their own place in history. Upper Sackville is a place where an inventor of yesteryear revolutionized the manner in which people communicated. Mr. Speaker, Charles Fennerty was a Canadian inventor from Upper Sackville who invented the wood pulp process for paper making, which was first adapted into the production of newsprint. Fennerty was also a poet, writing over 32 known poems. The Fennertys were farmers and lumbermen. During that period, paper was made from rags. Rag paper was not sufficient enough to keep up with the paper demands, and a new substitute for making paper had to be found since rags were in short supply. Mr. Speaker, many were trying different things to produce a new type of paper. But around 1839, Charles Fennerty started experimenting with wood as a substitute. In 1844, he sent a letter to the Acadian Recorder newspaper with a sample of his pulped wood paper, announcing his discovery of the world's first piece of paper made from pulp wood. It was his invention of a wood grinding machine that produced the pulp for making paper. His method of pulp making is still used today. By advancing paper into an unlimited supply, Fennerty became one of the great revolutionists in communications during the Industrial Revolution. His paper invention did for the world that the internet has done for us today, making the transfer of information so much easier. Mr. Speaker, little attention was given, and Mr. Fennerty himself never pursued his idea, as he never took out a patent on his process. But it was his idea that marked the beginning to a new industry, although today most people attribute F.G. Keller as the original inventor. Fennerty was also well known, as I said, with his poems, and many loved to listen and hear the poems that he would recite. Upon traveling to Australia, then he returned to Halifax in 1865. He held several positions: wood measurer, census taker, health warden, tax collector for his community, and overseas of the poor. He was also very involved in his church. Fennerty died on June the 10th, 1892, in his home in Upper Sackville, Nova Scotia, from a flu. Mr. Speaker, Maroon Hill today, called Middle Sackville, is yet another part of the greater Sackville area that holds its own in history. One of the most interesting events in the history of Atlantic Canada is the arrival of the Jamaican Maroons. These were the descendants of Africans enslaved in Jamaica who had escaped their Spanish slave owners in the mid-17th century. For the next 140 years, these freedom fighters fiercely defended their right to live as free and autonomous people. Few outsiders dared approach their strongholds in the mountains of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, a truce with the British government in 1738 finally saw the Maroons settled in free communities, the largest in Trelawney Town. Fighting broke out again in 1795, followed by a treaty in 1796. Accused of breaking the treaty, approximately 600 Maroons from Trelawney Town were sent to Nova Scotia aboard the Dover, the Mary, and the Anne. They arrived on June the 6th, 1796. The Jamaican government agreed to pay the cost of their upkeep. Governor John Wentworth of Nova Scotia wanted to keep the Maroons as a fighting force. They worked extensively on the fortifications of our well-known Citadel Hill, as well as the government house of that day. Mr. Speaker, the Duke of Kent formed the Maroons into a militia, which was quite useful as a unit designated to protect Fort George, now referred to as the Halifax Citadel. Many were settled on lands in the East and North Preston area, and Maroon Hill today called Middle Sackville. Mr. Speaker, Governor John Wentworth settled many on his own estate in East Preston, where his governor's farm was established, and his well-documented relationship began with a Maroon woman identified as Sarah Colley. Hence, the surname Colley originated and is still quite common today in East Preston. In fact, Colley is my wife's, Leah, her maiden name. Mr. Speaker, having spent 140 years as comrade in arms, the Maroons objected to being divided in this fashion, nor did they appreciate being put to work on the governor's estate. However, some Maroons who converted to Christianity were convinced to stay supportive of the British proposals and henceforth were moved to the Maroon Hill area in Middle Sackville as a cheap source of labor to begin cultivating the land. However, many objected and petitioned the British Crown in England to resettle in the land of their ancestors, hence leaving Nova Scotia, and on August the 7th, 1800, approximately 550 Maroons embarked for Freetown, Sierra Leone, in West Africa on board HMS Asia. Mr. Speaker, a good cross-section of African Nova Scotia history today Nova Scotians today, can trace their roots to these proud and noble individuals from the great Ashanti nation of Africa. Their amazing spirit and tremendous tenacity still thrives in their blood to continue being strong in all the things of life and liberty. Mr. Speaker, Beaver Bank is a community northeast of Lower Sackville on the Beaver Bank Road within the Halifax Regional Municipality. It is about 35 kilometers from the city of Halifax. As of 2011, its population was estimated at 119 families. Beaver Bank is today a rapidly developing community in the Halifax Regional Municipality. The motto of Beaver Bank is people together with nature. This community is comprised of many lakes, rivers, and forests. It has the country feel, only minutes from Halifax and Dartmouth. History says that the community dates back to 1776, when loyalists from Boston arrived. John Henry Barnstead, 1764 to 1861, and his mother, Mary Brown Parcel Barnstead, arrived there after the War of 1812. George and John Barrett were shopkeepers from Blackthorn, Oxford, England. In 1816, the Fultz House was granted 1,000 acres of land. Today's Fultz House Museum bears their name in nearby Lower Sackville. Mr. Speaker, other long-standing families in this area include Lively, the descendants of Reuben Lively, member of the 96th District, an American loyalist from South Carolina. He was granted 500 acres in the Rawdon Township after the American Revolutionary War in 1784. Schoenemann descendants of Karl Ludwig Schoenemann of Eisfeld, Germany, a former Hessian soldier in the American Revolutionary War. He arrived in Beaver Bank prior to or during the year of 1813. Among the oldest family names are Dean, Langell, Gilby, Peters, Woods, and Nicholson. Mr. Speaker, when the Canadian Railway reached Sackville in the mid-1850s, under the direction of Joseph Howe, the first chief commissioner of the Nova Scotia Railway Company, the next step was to construct a station and freight shed. The Beaver Bank station served the Sackville-Beaver Bank area until 1956, creating business opportunities for lumbermen by shipping their product to Halifax. Daniel Hallisey of County Cork, Ireland, was one of the builders of the original railway. He became the first station master. In 1856, he built a hotel next to the station, which may say served more as a tavern than anything else. The house offered the new assets of a telegraph and post office. which ran for 99 years. Sir Robert Borden was often present at this house for entertainment. Today, the Beaverbank Station building remains at the corner of the Beaverbank Road and Wingate Drive, formerly known as the Windsor Junction Crossroad, and has been converted into a pub called the Black Crow, now closed. Mr. Speaker, the Grove family offers a rich contribution to Beaverbank history. Originally from England, the siblings moved to Nova Scotia after living in Philadelphia for several years. The Grove sisters quickly established a reputation in Halifax due to their prestigious finishing school in the downtown area. They were described as those four English sisters whose ability and character influence for good such a large number of young ladies of that generation. Woodlands, the Grove residence, was built in Beaverbank in 1847. The two Grove brothers lived on the property, profiting from sawmilling, brickmaking, farming, and box making. In 1880, their sisters returned and established the Grove School for young ladies in its place, which ran until destroyed by fire in 1943. Mr. Speaker, one or all of the Grove sisters are the writers of what is thought to be the first piece of children's literature written in Nova Scotia, possibly even Canada, titled Little Grace, or Scenes in Nova Scotia. The sisters also are the main influence behind the construction of the first Anglican church in Beaverbank in 1886, the Church of the Good Shepherd. The original church was sold in 1998 to a private buyer and removed from its foundation. Today, it's located in the township of Chester and used for private purposes. Frances Shunaman McCarran Nee Grove donated the land in her nearby or newly developed Shunaman subdivision to house the newer and current Church of the Good Shepherd, which still stands today. Mr. Speaker, the RCAF station, Beaverbank, was a long-range pine tree line early warning radar station operated by the Royal Canadian Air Force, located in Beaverbank, or what is known by many as the base. RCAF station Beaverbank was approximately 40 kilometers north of Halifax, Dartmouth. The station sat on 430 acres with about a half-mile separation between the domestic and the operations site, both sites being divided by the county line between Halifax County, the domestic site, and Hants County operations site. The 22 Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron was the operational unit posted to the station, its colors having been created in 1953, and the unit made operational a year later in the fall of 1954. The radar unit itself was manually operated and reported to the Fredericton NORAD sector of RCAF Station St. Margaret's until September 1962, when this was changed to the Bangor NORAD sector of Topsham AFS, Maine. The 22 AC&W became SAGE operational on January 1, 1964. However, this capability did not last long, as the station was closed and the squadron disbanded for 4 months later, on April 1, 1964, following a NORAD realignment and increasing focus being placed on the DEW line. Royal Canadian Air Force Station Beaverbank occupied a unique location in proximity to Canada's largest Atlantic seaport and its largest naval base, making it an important early warning radar base during the manual environment of the 1950s. Since manned bomber raids by the Soviet Union in the area were considered quite likely, it was felt that RCAF Station Beaverbank fulfilled a critical role in the early days of Canada and North America's air defense. Mr. Speaker, the station was originally financed by the United States Air Force, although operational responsibility rested with the RCAF until 1962, when the RCAF assumed financial responsibility as well. In the mid-1970s, the base was converted for a short time into a cement plant. This was only used for a few years before the base was abandoned abandoned completely. Residents of Beaverbank in the 1950s had close access to the first Sackville Drive-In, a car racetrack, a drag strip called Drag City, Sackville Downs Raceway in the Downview area, Sackville Golf Course, driving range, and 9-hole par 3 course. Mr. Speaker, Beaverbank is often misspelled as one word, Beaverbank, as it was misprinted on provincial signs for much of the 1980s and 90s. After the community rallied together in protest for many years, the province reissued the signs with the correct spelling. There are still a few signs in the province that have not been corrected, and as some early texts, such as newspapers, spelled Beaverbank as one word. Many of the older residents still consider that spelling to be correct. Beaverbank continues to grow exponentially. One of, if not the oldest businesses still operating and employing people in the community is Barrett Lumber Limited. There is Shen's Variety Store on the Beaverbank Road, and restaurants such as Beaverbank Pizza, located on the cross-section between Beaverbank Road and Woodbine Avenue. Fusing Chinese restaurant located before the Beaverbank Pharmacy. Mr. Speaker, there are also 2 golf courses, Lost Creek Golf Club, a 19-hole championship golf course within a residential community located in Lost Creek subdivision, and Emerson Ridge Driving Range located across from Beaverbank's well-known Brown Hall. Also, there are a few daycare community facilities in the community as well. First Memories Daycare, located on the Beaverbank Road beside Woodbine Trailer Park Home. Peachtree Children's Center, located at 971 Wingate Drive, formerly known as the Windsor Junction Crossroad, located inside the Crossroads Wesleyan Church beside the Black Crow Pub. Rachel's Daycare, private in-home daycare located off Beaverbank Road on Majestic Avenue. Mr. Speaker, the riding of Sackville Beaverbank has developed through changes in many ways over the years to have and continue to be dynamic communities that holds many future opportunities through a focused vision toward open-minded development. Our large landmass dictates development that is required by new and existing families. Also, the only thing that hinders this future development is economics. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the future of Sackville Beaverbank can be so much more than subdivisions and used car lots. The large landmass of Sackville Beaverbank dictates the fact that as a community working together, we are the ones that choose our own destiny, and together we can make our future a prosperous one. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank first my wife Leah for her growing support. In the beginning, she was a bit uncertain about me becoming a politician. This direction was likened also to my decision to become a pastor. I want to thank my sons Alex and Jordan for their encouragement that was and still is very important to me. Alex was with us at caucus when we recognized Take Your Child to Work Day. He was very impressed with Premier McNeil and his new office. I also want to thank Alex's friends, DeJuan White, Donovan White, Blake Henry, Luke Eisner. I want to thank Mark Bootler, who got me to think about the possibilities that are a reality today. He was the one that, after witnessing me chair a meeting, asked, "Did you ever think about getting into politics?" Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the now Premier of Nova Scotia, Stephen McNeil. I remember the first time that I met him in his office, and as we were reaching out to shake hands, something came to me, and it was the memory of an old children's show that was on television on CBC many years ago. And in trying to keep up with what we were beginning to say, the thing that came into my mind was, look up, look way up, and I'll call Rusty. Well, my name isn't Rusty, but I think Premier McNeil has all kinds of Rusties to work along with him in this new venture that we are part of.
Order. I'll just remind the honourable member not to use proper names in the speech and address to reply, only to use titles.
like to also thank one of the other folks that helped me along the way, and he was part of that chain that led us here today. I want to thank a good friend of mine, Reagan Oliver, and his wife Jennifer, who are continued encouragers that told me that everything that I have done in my life, and especially as a volunteer, has prepared me for this great opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my friend Edward Downey and his wife Angela, who were in total agreement when I asked what they thought about me throwing my hat into the political arena. The reply was, why not? Mr. Speaker, the list could go on and on. My campaign manager, Mr. Andrew McNeil, and his wife Nancy, Mr. Pearlie Oliver as my official agent, and his wife Carol, Mr. Kirk Mitchell, who volunteered at my campaign office after he returned home from work up north. He seen my name on the signs, and he had to find out if it was the old Steve that he knew from years ago in high school. And once he found out it was me, he asked, how can I help? My friend Warren Kelsey, Terry Kelsey, Daryl Kelsey, Mr. Derek Keel and his wife Claudette, Miss Lori Watkins, John and Krista Alford, and also their 8-year-old daughter, who is so excited about politics, Emily. Miss Sylvia Sinclair, who is now my CA. Mr. Speaker, in recognizing these folks by name, I run the risk of possibly insulting someone by not mentioning them. All I can say is that they know who they are, and I apologize if I haven't mentioned them by name. Know that I appreciate what you have done, and that the faith that you have in me, whether I have mentioned you or not, you made our dream a reality. To have anyone put their faith and trust in you is a humbling reality. They are the ones that see something in you that we personally miss many times. To be an elected official creates many opportunities. They can be financial, social, and for sure is a great self-esteem builder. But we must never become complacent toward the people that we represent. There are people that have entrusted me to be their voice in this legislature that are really struggling, and I must insist on saying it again. There are a lot of people in our province, very near to us, that are struggling big time. It is easy to lose touch with the people that we represent if we lose touch. I've told folks that if you recognize this attitude in me, let me know, and I promise I will listen. Mr. Speaker, when I told my brother Kevin about delivering this speech as a response to the throne speech, and that I had up to an hour to deliver it, he said, an hour? Is that all they're willing to give you? Mr. Speaker, I haven't had a long, diverse career, first as a transmission technician for over 36 years, a volunteer, a pastor, a concerned citizen that traveled to New York when they needed help, to Haiti to lend a hand after a devastating earthquake. I have worked with youth in trying to mend relationships that were severed with parents and teachers and their peers. I have worked in forestry, for that matter, sort of old school, with a horse. Not many people do it anymore, but what an experience to work in the forestry with a horse. I have done work that I have enjoyed when no one else wanted anything to do with it. It isn't work for me because almost everything interests me. In the 80s, I was a DJ for a very popular cable radio show in Sackville called The Funk Plaza, which ran for 9 years. Frank Magazine got a hold of that information from my bio online and used it in one of their issues. They called me the Funky Holy Man. In that issue, their prayer was, please, Lord, let the Funky Holy Man win. Well, I guess their prayers have been answered. If I am to be funky and if I am to be holy, then I want to be the best at it, funky and holy. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to catch but a glimpse of who I am, what I have done, and what I plan to do as the voice of Sackville Beaverbank. Working together is when government works the best. Nova Scotia first. Thank you.
I recognize the Government House Leader.
Speaker, if I could seek the unanimous consent of the House to revert back to daily routine, presenting reports of committees.
Is it agreed? Presenting reports of committees. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Chair of the Committee of Law Amendments, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bills. Bill number 5, an act to ban the importation of hydraulic fracturing wastewater. Bill number 9, an act to ensure accountability in providing economic development assistance in Nova Scotia. Bill number 10, an act to amend Chapter 9 of the Acts of 2012, the Maritime Link Act. Bill number 17, an act to amend Chapter 155, Revised Statutes 1989, the Executive Council Act, and Chapter 376 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Service Act. The committee recommends these bills to the favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Whole House? Ordered that these bills be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Bills. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could seek the consent of the members of the House to now have these bills that were just referred to from the Committee on Law Amendments added to the order paper for consideration this evening.
Granted. Oh, is it agreed? I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that you now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House on bills.
Motion is carried. We'll have a short recess while the committee gets set up.
The Committee of the Whole House of Bills will come to order. I'll just wait a second. Yeah. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, would you please call Bill number 1, the Electricity Reform Act?
I call Bill number 1, the Electricity Reform Act. And I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 1 was referred back from the Law Amendments Committee without any amendments and contains 6 clauses.
6 clauses? Okay. Okay, shall clause 1 carry? Carried. Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. Just sign here. There. Okay. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you now please call Bill number 5, the Importation of Hydraulic Fracturing Wastewater Prohibition Act?
Okay. I now. 5. It's on the other side of it. I now call Bill number 5, the Importation of Hydraulic Fracturing Wastewater Prohibition Act. I address the clerk. Recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 5 was also reported back without amendments from Law Amendments Committee and contains 6 clauses.
Excellent. Shall clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. Thank you. Now 7. Oh, yeah. I now recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, would you now call Bill number 7, the Public Service Act?
I call Bill number 7, the Public Service Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 7 was also referred back from Law Amendments Committee without amendment and has 1 clause.
Okay, shall clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Oh, carried. Carried. Pardon me? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize, just a minute, let me sign this one first. There. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill number 9, Accountability and Economic Development Assistance Act?
I'd like to call Bill number 9, the Accountability and Economic Development Assistance Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 9 was referred back from Law Amendments without amendment and contains 8 clauses.
Shall clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. Number 10. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Madam Chair, could you now please call Bill number 10, the Maritime Link Act?
I call Bill number 10, the Maritime Link Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 10 was also referred back from Law Amendments without amendment and contains 5 clauses.
Shall clause 1 carry? Carried. Shall the remaining clauses carry? Carried. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I
recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you now please call Bill number 17, the Executive Council Act and Public Service Act?
I call Bill number 17, the 17, the Executive Council Act and the Public Service Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 17 was also referred back from law amendments with no amendments and contains 25 clauses.
25. Excellent. Shall Clause 1 carry? Carried. Shall all the remaining clauses carry? Carried. Shall the title carry? Carried. Shall the bill carry? Carried. The bill is carried. Is that it? I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that you do now rise and report these bills to the House.
Right now, what? The motion is carried. The committee will now rise and report its business to the House. Thank you. Order, please. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Bill reports. I recognize the clerk.
We report that the Committee of the Whole House on Bills has met and considered the following bills, Bills 1, 5, 7, 9, 10, and 17, without amendments, and the Chairman has been instructed to recommend these bills to the favorable consideration of the House.
Ordered that these bills be read for a third time on a future date. The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. With the consent of the House, Madam Speaker, may I request that the Bill number 11, which was referred back today by the Chair of the Private and Local Bills Committee, may I request that, Madam Speaker, that with the consent of the House, that we waive through Committee of the Whole on Bill number 11, and that we proceed immediately to third reading of Bill number 11, the Sir William Young's Benevolent and Charitable Fund. And I so move.
Agreed. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could you please call government business bills for third reading?
I call the government bills for third reading. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 11, the Sir William Young's Benevolent and Charitable Fund?
I'm sorry. The motion is for third reading of Bill number 11. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? The motion is carried.
Bill number 11, entitled An Act Respecting the Sir William Young's Benevolent and Charitable Fund.
Okay, order that the bill do pass and the title be read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Madam Speaker, that concludes the government business for today. I would move that the House sit tomorrow from the hours of 12 noon until 4 p.m. and following the daily routine and question period, we will proceed to a third reading of the bills that have passed through the House today. And as well, we will continue. What else have we got tomorrow? Well done, second reading. We will continue with the Committee of the Whole House on the bills that remain in law amendments today. I believe Bill number 12, 14, 15, and the bills number 19 and 20, which cleared the second reading today. And with the consent of the House, and if time permits, possibly some address in reply as well. So with that, Madam Speaker, I would move that the House do now rise and to meet again tomorrow from the hours of 12 noon to 4 p.m.
The motion is that the House rise to meet again tomorrow from 12 to 4 p.m. Would those in favor of the motion please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. We stand adjourned until 12 noon tomorrow.